Hello, my name is Helen Thomas, and I'm the Outreach Archivist for Kennesaw State University. In my position, I'm responsible for connecting researchers to the oral histories in our collections, as well as thinking broadly about how we can make these materials more accessible to our user community. Today, I'm going to give an overview of the collections in our care and how we approach their long-term preservation and access. I'll start off with a bit of background about our unique history, which is that of not just one, but two schools, Kennesaw State University and Southern Polytechnic State University. Southern Poly was founded in 1948 as the Technical Institute. Originally a unit of Georgia Tech, its first campus was located in Chamblee, Georgia, but later permanently moved to Marietta in Cobb County. Kennesaw State University began as Kennesaw Junior College when it was chartered in 1963 and held its first classes during the 1966-1967 school year on the Kennesaw campus where we are still located today. In 2013, the University System of Georgia Board of Regents announced that Kennesaw State and Southern Poly would consolidate under the name Kennesaw State University, which has resulted in our repository housing the history of both schools. Our collecting scope includes the records of both universities, as well as materials relating to the history of our region, that being Cobb County and the surrounding counties of North and Northwest Georgia. We are home to several oral history collections, but the largest by far is the Kennesaw State University Oral History Project. The collection was started by a KSU history professor, Dr. Tom Scott, in 1978 and remains an active collecting project to this day. On the top right of the screen, you'll see a screenshot from one of Dr. Scott's earliest interviews conducted with Marietta City Schools Superintendent Schuler Antley in 1978. And the image on the bottom right shows an interview with Cobb County Commissioner Jerica Richardson, which he completed in January of this year. Over the last 44 years, Dr. Scott and his students have collected over 800 interviews covering university history and regional history, including series on specific topics such as the consolidation of Kennesaw State and Southern Poly, the history of the local aircraft manufacturing industry, and the role of the Cobb County branch of the NAACP in the long civil rights movement. As you might imagine, for a collection covering such a long time frame, these oral histories were recorded on a variety of media. The earliest interviews in the collection were recorded on 3/4-inch U-matic tapes, and the vast majority of the collection was recorded on audio cassette. Only in recent years has the project transitioned fully to recording on digital media. In addition to the KSU Oral History Project, we are home to several other oral history projects conducted by KSU faculty, students, and staff, and relating to a variety of topics within our collecting scope, including the Atlanta student movement, LGBTQ history in Cobb County, the Lemon Street schools, which served Marietta's African-American community during the period of segregation, and of course, the Museum of History and Holocaust Education's Legacy Series and Immigrant Stories. In total, we estimate that we have roughly 1,000 oral history recordings in our care. When we consider the long-term preservation of an oral history project, we have to consider its many components because it's never just boxes of recordings. For each individual interview, you will have the original media on which the interview is recorded. You will have an accompanying release form or gift agreement. It is very important to maintain the release form, preferably multiple copies, since without it, you may be limited in how much access you can provide to this interview. Maintaining both a physical copy and a digital scan of the signed agreement is always a good idea if that's something you have the time and resources to do. You may also maintain some biographical information on the interviewee that will assist with the creation of metadata. Sometimes all of your biographical information will come from the interview itself, but if details like a person's birth date or job title aren't explicitly addressed in the interview, you may want some additional detail and a place to keep that. This may also be where you keep obituaries for interviewees who have passed away, which can be both additional sources of information about their life and confirmation that they are no longer living should you ever think of reaching out in the future. This may also be where you keep contact information for your interviewee to prevent that connection being lost if the staff member the interviewee worked with moves on from your institution. You may have transcripts or indexes of the interview. These have several affordances, such as they are often faster for researchers to review than an hour-long recording. A digital text file can be keyword searched for a quick reference, and a transcript can provide a form of access if for whatever reason you're unable to make audio or video available. Maybe you don't have playback equipment for your reading room, or your online platform has limited space or media capabilities. In that instance, a transcript is the next best thing and a great alternative. And finally, you may have digital copies of your original recording created for preservation and/or access. To preserve our original physical recordings, the first thing to do is to make sure each one has a case. This might seem very simple, but we found lots of uncased tapes in various accessions to our collections, which leaves them vulnerable to the exposed tape getting damaged, along with the fact that the plastic part of the tape is deteriorating over time too, and the plastic on a 40-year-old cassette tape is often brittle and can be easily cracked or crushed if it's not encased. Since we're trying to preserve these items for as long as possible, or at least until we can get the recording off that original media, it's ideal to have a case for each. After that, like all our collections, we make sure the materials are stored in archival quality containers, preferably ones suited to the media you're storing. For example, these acid-free boxes pictured here are specifically designed to hold cassette tapes in a way in which they're supported. They're not on top of each other, and I can clearly see their labels without having to move them around. Our storage area is also climate controlled following the Society of American Archivists guidelines for preservation. We endeavor to keep the relative humidity between 30 and 50% and the temperature between 65 and 70 degrees. And that climate data is logged automatically for us using a preservation environmental monitor. We do this to provide the best possible environment to slow deterioration and prolong the life of our materials for as long as possible. Our release forms and any accompanying biographical or contact information are stored in accession files, still in our stacks, but separate from the collections. This is for easy access for us to support their different storage needs, and also because they are not records we would be making available to our researchers, especially something like contact information. We also have some corresponding digital accession files for scanned copies of this information or instances where that information is born digital. Our goal is to provide a transcript for every oral history in our collection, and many of our interviews are transcribed. A few hundred of the KSU Oral History Project interviews were transcribed, indexed, bound, and are available in that format in our reading room. Others have unbound transcripts that are stored in the stacks, but available for researchers. We are also working to make as many of these available online as possible, and at the moment that effort is led by researcher demand. We have scanned some of our older transcripts by request, run them through optical character recognition using Adobe to make them keyword searchable, and place them online. If a transcript does not already exist, we utilize a transcription service called rev.com. We have found it to be both cost efficient and quick. While the transcripts they return usually require some review and cleanup by our staff, the time we spend on reviewing each transcript is significantly less than if we were to transcribe each one ourselves. It is worth noting that to use the service, you do have to provide a digital copy of the interview. We are not currently creating individual indexes for new transcripts. This practice was the norm for printed transcripts produced in the 80s and the 90s. And while indexes can still be very useful tools, they take time and/or money to create. And instead, since all our new transcripts are accessible online in digital formats, we have chosen to rely on the ability of researchers to keyword search the interview for specific words and phrases, along with individual description of each interview to identify key topics. Our eventual goal is to reformat all of our oral histories on legacy analog media, as it is older and especially fragile, and make all our oral histories available as digital files. Due to preservation concerns and a desire to create the best possible copy, we have discontinued any in-house reformatting efforts. We now outsource all our audiovisual media migration to Preserve South. We have to date digitized all our oral history recordings produced prior to 1985, and we'll be digitizing the rest as we are able to allocate funding for this purpose. We are prioritizing digitization based on age and condition of the materials, as well as based on researcher demand. Our digitized and born digital oral histories go through the same ingest process as all our digital materials, which is conducted by our digital archivist, Christian Kelly. Our digital preservation workflow follows the Open Archival Information System recommended practices and includes the creation of information packages containing preservation and access copies of the original media, along with metadata, gift agreements, transcripts, checksums, and more, all of which is saved to our internal dark archives. The preservation formats we're currently using for reformatted oral histories are .wav files for audio recordings and .mov files for video. Oral histories for which we have assigned release are made available either in our reading room or increasingly on our scholarly online access repository. SOAR provides us with the option to include both sound or video file as an MP3 or MP4, along with a PDF transcript. Each of these can serve a different purpose. People enjoy seeing and hearing the voices of the interviewees, and for some interpretive projects, sound and video clips could not be replaced with a text quote. We recently digitized some interviews upon request for our computer science department, which is working on a virtual reality department history project for which it required audio clips from interviews with former professors. They could not have used a transcript for that purpose. Sound and video can also foster a greater connection between the interviewee and the researcher. Having access to their intonation, emphases, facial expressions, and emotions expressed during the interview can add meaning to their words that might be lost in just a transcript. On the other hand, a transcript provides a quickly searchable version of the interview that can be invaluable to a researcher looking for specific content and requires much less time for them to review. Whenever possible, we make both the sound or video file and a transcript available. In addition to access to the recording or transcript itself, you also have to think about what tools and resources you have to make your oral histories findable by researchers. One thing that we've been working on in the last few years is improving description for our oral histories. The KSU Archives has only existed since 2004. Prior to that time, the Oral History Project transcripts and a few other archival materials were held and made accessible by the KSU Library. To date, about 250 of our oral histories have records in the KSU Library catalog, but this is not a comprehensive representation of all our oral histories. For that, we rely on our finding aids, the descriptions of the contents of our archival collections. We use ArchivSpace as our finding aid platform, and all processed oral histories for which we have assigned release are represented there. However, a few years ago, we realized that many were only identified with the name of the interviewee and possibly a couple of subject terms. Other than the series in which the interview appears, which is usually something very broad, like Cobb County history, a potential researcher would already have to know who they were looking for and why for this to be a useful resource. For example, an interview with Roy Barnes was tagged only with the subject Cobb County, politics and government, with no mention that he is a former governor of Georgia, when he served in this capacity, or any information about the specific topics discussed in the interview. A lack of description like this will greatly hinder the ability of researchers to connect with oral histories that could be useful to them. So it's important to think about providing contextual information along with the names of your interviewees whenever you're promoting your resources. Just this morning, I received an email from a remote researcher who had come across the Cobb County Oral History series online. She said that she was finding that only some had PDFs attached and that ideally she'd be interested in reading all of them. I wrote back to let her know that yes, while many of our transcripts are available online, many are not. Some are only available in the reading room and others are not transcribed. I said that we're working to provide greater remote access and description, but with such a large collection, it is slow going. She then said she'd try to narrow down her request based on their description, and I offered to talk with her further about which interviews may be most useful, as the description for each interview is often limited as well. I share this to show how description and access are intertwined. Ideally, I would love to provide transcripts online for as many interviews as possible, as soon as possible. But of course, there are obstacles to consider. Transcription and digitization of existing transcripts both take up staff time and resources. Additional metadata will need to be created to present these materials via SOAR. Some oral histories may be restricted to reading room usage, and we may begin running short of server space. Alternatively, if the description of these oral histories can be improved, it can help direct researchers to the interviews most relevant to their research, which will save time for both them and for our staff. We can then use specific researcher requests as one way of prioritizing interviews for online access, since the general request of, could you please digitize everything now, is never going to be something we can reasonably accommodate. The creation of an internal spreadsheet documenting the entirety of the 840 interview KSU Oral History Project has also been very helpful to our staff in making choices about how to provide access and which interviews to prioritize for digitization, by identifying things like which interviews have signed release forms and which ones are the oldest. So I recommend doing that as well. In addition to finding aids in SOAR, we also try to increase the findability of our oral histories by including relevant references to the collections in our subject guides. And I try to pull out examples or excerpts in instruction sessions whenever I can to make sure that students understand what oral histories are and how they can be useful in their projects and assignments. That's it for me. Again, my name is Helen Thomas, and I'm the Outreach Archivist for Kennesaw State University. If you have any questions about our approaches to long-term preservation and access for oral histories, or our oral histories in general, please don't hesitate to reach out. And thank you very much.